Welcome to the field of global agricultural trade. Imagine a game that promises fair competition, but from the very start, the race is rigged. Agriculture is not like any other sector. It's about food security, livelihoods, and even cultural identity. The WTO's agreement on agriculture was supposed to bring fairness and opportunity. It promised freedom, openness, and a level playing field, but in reality, it delivered something very different, especially for developing countries.
At the heart of this agreement are what we call the three pillars: market access, domestic support, and export subsidies. These were designed to make global trade more equal, and as we'll show, they often worked in the opposite direction. Instead of correcting inequality, they reinforced it.
The first pillar is market access. Countries agreed to cut tariffs, but the average cut formula was misleading. It allowed powerful economies like the US, the EU, and Japan to keep tariff peaks on sensitive products. Take the European Union as an example. While they reduced tariffs overall, they still kept a staggering 289% tariff on dairy. This meant that developing countries could not realistically export those products, no matter what the rules said on paper.
The second pillar is domestic support. Here, subsidies were divided into different boxes. The amber box contained trade distorting subsidies that had not been reduced, but developed nations carved out a blue box loophole where they shifted billions in subsidies, avoiding any real cuts. Even the supposedly non-disturbing green box has been criticized by scholars like Vieira as being trade distorting in practice. The outcome was clear. Rich countries kept finding ways to pay billions to their farmers, while developing countries, often under pressure from the IMF and World Bank loan conditions, were forced to reduce or remove even their minimal support. This entrenched inequality meant that small farmers in poor countries had to compete against heavily subsidized products without a safety net of their own.
The third pillar is export subsidies. On the surface, the rules seemed fair. No new users were allowed, but in reality, this froze the system in favor of wealthy nations who were already using them. Developing countries were permanently locked out. The result was devastating. Rich countries dumped their subsidy surplus on global markets, crashing world prices, destroying the livelihoods of millions of farmers, and deepening food insecurity in the very places the agreement was supposed to help.
But the story doesn't end with despair. In 2003, at the Cancun Ministerial, developing countries finally pushed back. The US and EU arrived with a proposal to expand the blue box loophole, but this time developing countries led by Brazil, India, China said enough. They formed the G20 coalition, demanding real change, deep cuts to developed countries, domestic subsidies, a true end to export subsidies, and a safeguard mechanism to protect their farmers from import surges. The United States caused the Cancun talks to collapse. For the first time, developing countries collectively changed its structural imbalance of global trade rules. It was a turning point, proof that power could be contested when nations stood together.
Beyond the WTO, the same struggles continue in regional trade agreements. Deals like NAFTA or EU partnerships often force developing countries to open their markets without giving them proper safeguards, leaving local farmers vulnerable. But there are also new alternatives. South-South agreements, such as the African Continental Free Trade Area, show that different trade architectures are possible, ones that prioritize development, flexibility, and resilience rather than simply extending old inequalities. At the heart of all this lies a deeper philosophical conflict. Should food be treated purely as a commodity subject to market efficiency and profit, or should it be recognized as a fundamental human right tied to sovereignty, culture, and survival? This question underpins every debate on agricultural trade.
So the story of the agreement on agriculture is more than a technical discussion about tariffs and subsidies. It's a story of how power writes rules in its own favor and how those rules create real human consequences on farmers, on communities, on food security itself. This module equips us not only to learn the rules of the game, but also to question them. And more importantly, to imagine how they could be changed, because in the end, trade is not just about numbers or efficiency, it's about people, fairness, and the world we want to build.